Hello everyone! In the last few days I've been trying to make Nidoqueen work in the Master League, and the team that I had the most success with contains another spicy pick, which is Shadow Tyranitar. Nidoqueen has a considerably lower total damage output than pretty much every other pick in Master League, but it has a really good typing, giving it a few positive matchups against some of the most common Pokémon, that is Zacian, Togekiss and Melmetal. It also has a decent matchup with Zarude and Melmetal, and it can nuke some steel types with Earthquake. And the reason I use Earthquake over Earth Power is because Nidoqueen rarely survives to reach 2 nuke moves, so then Earthquake just deals a bigger chunk of damage. So pretty much the only Pokemon that Nidoqueen can beat are hard counters to Tyranitar, making them a working duo. They both share the ground and water weakness, but Tyranitar can handle all of the ground types by double shielding, so the biggest problem is if the opponent leads Kyogre. The third Pokemon, which I use as a main switch, is Melmetal. With this team I went 16 and 9 in a day, resulting in more than 100 ELO gain, and here I will show you some of the more interesting games, both wins and losses. Firstly, I will show a game against Steelkill, and he leads with a Zacian, so of course I want my Nidoqueen against it, so I switch into Melmetal immediately and hoping that they will switch, but usually they stay in for at least one close combat. And I'm forced to shield it, since if I let it go then I will definitely not have switch advantage. So I was hoping that my energy advantage on Melmetal could maintain switch advantage, but then my opponent has a Garchomp in the back, so here I will for sure not be able to have the switch advantage, because every superpower that is the only way to damage the Garchomp will also debuff me, so I will definitely not be able to KO this Garchomp. So I charge up a whole bunch of extra energy and go straight back into Tyranitar, since our switch timers are desynced now, because my opponent stayed in with Zacian for a bit. So now I at least have a lot of energy on my Melmetal, and I'm certain that I can have my Nidoqueen against the Zacian. And here my opponent gets a little greedy and let me reach a Stone Edge, which will force a shield from them if they don't want all of this energy to go to waste, and then they charge up to basically 100 energy before they throw. And of course I'm letting my Tyranitar go down so that my Nidoqueen can start absorbing all of this damage from the Zacian. So here it doesn't matter what they throw, and since they were debuffed they also took a lot of poison jab damage. But then my opponent's last Pokemon is an Melmetal, which is great, because then after one debuff from Nidoqueen, Rock Slide will deal even more damage. So all I need to do now is connect with one Rock Slide, and then it's in farm down range with Nidoqueen. So my opponent throws a charge move, but it doesn't matter. My Nidoqueen has plenty of health to deal with both of the lost HP here on Melmetal, and then the Zacian cannot do anything. And right here I will undercharge my Poison Fang a little bit, just to let my opponent throw a charge move so that I can show how little damage the charge moves from Zacian deals, because Nidoqueen can easily survive 2 of these. And that's a GG. Schnitzel Naiman is up next, and he leads with a Landorus, and the way I deal with pretty much any ground Pokemon, whether it's Landorus or Groudon or Excadrill or Garchomp, is that I double shield my Shadow Tyranitar, because as you've seen my entire team is weak to ground types, but Tyranitar can still deal with them with just pure fast move damage. So I double shield the superpowers, and then my opponent switches into Kyogre, which is another big threat for this team, but at least I can have my Melmetal up against the Kyogre, which is a fairly neutral matchup. So I can easily tank one Surf, and then I use one more Thundershock to time my charge move so that my opponent doesn't get a piggyback. And then I deal 4 more Thundershocks to do my next superpower right before my opponent reaches a charge move, and then my opponent gets greedy and try to farm down, so I get another superpower off. But this time my opponent knows that I'm debuffed, so I'm not going to be able to KO him, and here I go in with Tyranitar because it has a 1-turn fast move, and 1-turn fast moves are supposed to deal the damage before my opponent can use their charge move. It doesn't always work because Niantic can't fix their game, but then my opponent comes in with Landorus again, and I'm scared of the next superpower, so I switch into Nidoqueen trying to catch it, and now it's resisted instead of double super effective, and my opponent's last Pokemon is a Zekrom. So here is one position where the Earthquake is much better than Earth Power, because Earth Power wouldn't even be close to KO that, and then I would have lost the game. But now I was able to win, thanks to Nidoqueen and the Earthquake. My next game is against Oshare Meganesan, and he leads with a Giratina Origin form, which is super good for my Tyranitar but bad for my backline, so I really need to maintain switch advantage in this game, and my opponent goes into Kyogre, so I counter switch into Melmetal as soon as I can. because the way I maintain switch advantage here is that I reach 4 charge moves before he reaches 3 on Kyogre. My Melmetal takes 19 seconds to go for 2 Rock Slides and 2 Superpowers, while the Kyogre reaches 3 Surfs in 22.5 seconds. So as long as I time my charge moves correctly by doing 1, 4 or 7 Thunder Shocks between each charge move, I will be able to outpace the Kyogre, even though it had 1 extra Waterfall against my Tyranitar. So here I double up on Superpowers, and my opponent is still 1 Waterfall away from the Surf, so I've successfully managed to maintain my switch advantage. But then my opponent comes in with Dialga and I'm not able to reach my next superpower, so I'm still in a pretty rough spot. And in this position I will be able to survive 1 Iron Head and then hopefully reach my Earthquake, but my opponent switches, and there I made the crucial misplay that I should have stayed in against the Giratina until I reached the Earthquake, because now I'm not sure that I will be able to reach the Earthquake against my opponent's Dialga. There were basically 2 ways I could have won this game, either by having Earth Power instead of Earthquake on Nidoqueen, or by having staying in right there and made 2 more poison jabs so that I had the Earthquake ready, so that I could have one-shot the Dialga. But now I was not able to do that and I lost the game because of it. My next opponent is Shampus for Life, and he leads with a Zarude, and that's pretty much the worst thing that my Tyranitar ever can face, so I'm going straight into my Melmetal and my opponent counter switches into Zacian. So here I'm not going to throw any charge moves before my opponent uses a close combat, and that is because now I will take down the Zacian with 2 Rock Slides instead of 3, which still is much more efficient, even though I wasted some energy by hitting 100 energy. So now my opponent does not shield, and then I use one more Thunder Shock to stay efficient with my timing, and then take down the Zacian, and my opponent decides that he wants to try to farm down with his own Melmetal, but that's a kinda big mistake, because not only am I able to reach 1 superpower, but I'm able to reach 2 superpowers. So my Melmetal firstly it took a very important switch advantage, but then it also took 1 shield and half of the health of my opponent's Melmetal. And here I'm thinking, what is my Tyranitar going to do this game? Absolutely nothing. My opponent has only hard counter to Tyranitar, so I'm using it as an extra shield for my Nidoqueen, and then my opponent comes back in with Zarude against Nidoqueen, and here, since I have 2 shields, I will be able to destroy this Zarude, and I'm going for my Poison Fangs as soon as I get them to debuff my opponent's Zarude and defeat it as quickly as possible. Because then, as long as I can deal with Zarude, the Melmetal won't be a problem, since I will just resist all of the charge moves and one-shot it with an Earthquake. So I farm down, and now I have a whole bunch of energy, and my opponent goes for a charge move. I'm not afraid at all, unless it runs Flash Cannon, I'm going to be able to defeat it, but then my opponent resigns before I can connect with my Earthquake. Moving on to the next game against Sally Drums, and he leads with a Dialga, and the way I play this is I go for the 1 shield, because if I don't miss any fast moves, then I'm going to win the 1 shield, just with pure bite damage. And all of the Dragon Breaths and the bites deals 5 damage each, but Tyranitar has more HP than Dialga, and that's why it wins, and Dialga is not able to reach 2 Iron Heads. But then my opponent has a Groudon in the back, so thankfully they didn't shield. But I'm pretty much forced to shield here, because none of my Pokemon in the back would comfortably be able to farm that last bit of HP down. So I sacrificed both of my shields to deal half of the health of Dialga and get switch advantage, so that my Nidoqueen doesn't have to face the Dialga. And here basically my only win con is if my opponent has something that Nidoqueen counters hard in the back, but they have a Giratina, so at this point there is just no way for me to win. But if they had had a Zacian or Togekiss, then I would have still had a chance, but now I'm just resigning. Moving on to the last game, and it's against Nisfu, and he leads with an Yveltal. So here I don't like this matchup, since it's so bait dependent on the Focus Blasts and the bites are resisted, so I went straight into Melmetal, and it turns out my opponent has a Machamp in the back. So what I'm gonna do here is I wait for my opponent to throw his charge move before I use my superpower, so that I can get off 2 of them. Because if I'm debuffed, then I'm KO'd by 1 cross chop. So at least I got 1 shield, and I have to deal with this Machamp with my Nidoqueen, because my Tyranitar can't do anything against it. So now I have to place my faith into my Tyranitar. I take down this Machamp here with a Poison Fang and one more Poison Jab, and then my opponent comes in with a Metagross. So here, hopefully they don't shield, because Earthquake almost one-shots the Metagross, but they expected it and shielded, so now I'm in a pretty rough spot, and my opponent got one free Bullet Punch there, because Niantic wouldn't let me switch. But now it's just a race, basically. I will be able to farm down this Metagross if my opponent doesn't switch, and then it's a race between Tyranitar or Yveltal, who can reach their nuke first, and I'm just a little bit quicker to reach my Stone Edge. And Stone Edge one-shots the Yveltal, and then the Metagross has no energy, so I'm able to farm down with bites. And that's it. Thanks for watching.